The rain hammered against the windows of the small Chen family apartment as Emma Rose Chen sat at her easel, painting the last touches on her assignment for art school. At 19, she had dreams bigger than the cramped space she shared with her family in downtown Seattle. Her dark hair fell in gentle waves around her shoulders as she concentrated on capturing the perfect shade of sunset orange. Her father's voice echoed from the living room, strained and desperate. Emma had been hearing hushed phone conversations for weeks now, always ending with her father's defeated sighs. The family's small electronics repair shop had been struggling since the big chain stores moved into their neighborhood. "Emma, please come here," her father called, his voice carrying a weight she had never heard before. She set down her brush and walked into the living room, where her parents sat on their worn sofa. Her mother's eyes were red from crying, and her father's hands shook as he held a stack of papers. "Sit down, sweetheart," her mother whispered, patting the space between them. Robert Chen cleared his throat, struggling to find the words. "Emma, our situation has become impossible. The shop owes more money than we can ever repay. We're going to lose everything unless—" He paused, unable to meet his daughter's eyes. "Unless what, Papa?" Emma asked, though a cold dread was already settling in her stomach. "There's a man, a very wealthy man, who has offered to help our family. But his help comes with conditions." Emma's heart began to race. "What kind of conditions?" Her mother reached for her hand. "He wants to marry you, Emma. It would be a business arrangement, nothing more. You would be taken care of, and our family would be saved." The words hit Emma. "Like a physical blow? You want to sell me?" "It's not like that," her father said quickly. "Nicholas Blackthorne is a respected businessman. He owns one of the largest tech companies on the West Coast, who would want for nothing. I don't care about his money. I have dreams, plans for my future. I'm supposed to graduate next year and open my own art gallery." Her parents exchanged a glance filled with pain and desperation. "There's more," her father continued reluctantly. "If you refuse, we won't just lose the shop, we'll lose this apartment, everything. Your sister Sophie won't be able to finish high school. We'll end up on the streets." The meeting 2 days later, Emma found herself sitting in the lobby of Blackthorne Industries, a gleaming skyscraper that seemed to touch the clouds. She wore her only good dress, a simple navy blue piece that her mother had bought for her high school graduation. The elevator carried her to the 50th floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Seattle's skyline. A secretary with perfectly styled blonde hair led her through a corridor lined with expensive artwork. "Mr. Blackthorne will see you now," the secretary announced, opening massive oak doors. The office was larger than Emma's entire apartment. Behind a desk that could have doubled as a dining table sat a man who immediately commanded attention. Nicholas Blackthorne was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his early 30s, with sharp features and piercing gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his charcoal suit probably cost more than her family's monthly rent. He stood when she entered, and Emma was surprised by his height. Even in her heels, she barely reached his shoulder. "Mr. Chen," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "Please have a seat." Emma sat in the leather chair across from his desk, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "I assume your father explained the situation?" Nicholas continued, returning to his chair. "He explained that you want to buy a wife," Emma replied, surprising herself with her boldness. A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Direct. I appreciate that. Yes, I'm proposing a marriage contract. In exchange for your agreement, your family's debts will be cleared, and they'll receive enough money to start fresh." "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" Nicholas leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. "A wife who understands that this is purely a business transaction. No emotional complications, no romantic expectations. Why me? Surely a man in your position could have any woman he wanted. 'Cause you need what I can provide, and I need someone who won't develop inconvenient feelings. Love is a luxury I can't afford." There was something in his tone, a hint of pain buried beneath the cold professionalism, that made Emma curious despite herself. "What happened to you?" she asked softly. His expression hardened immediately. "That's not your concern. Do we have a deal or not?" The contract to the marriage contract was 12 pages long, written in legal language that made Emma's head spin. Nicholas's lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, explained each clause with clinical precision. The marriage will be in name only, he stated. They'll live in Mr. Blackthorne's residence, but maintain separate quarters. He'll attend social functions as his wife when required, but otherwise, your time is your own. You may continue your education if you wish. Emma looked up from the papers. What about divorce? The contract is for 5 years minimum. After that, either party may request dissolution. You'll receive a settlement that will ensure your financial security for life. And if I want to leave before 5 years, Nicholas spoke for the first time since they'd begun reviewing the contract, then your family's debts become due immediately, with interest. Emma felt the trap closing around her. She thought of her parents, of her younger sister Sophie, who dreamed of becoming a doctor, of the small apartment that had been their sanctuary, but would soon be taken away. I need time to think, she said. You have until tomorrow morning, Nicholas replied. After that, the offer expires. The decision that night, Emma sat on the fire escape outside her bedroom window, looking out at the city lights. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of wet pavement and possibility.
Ouch!
In her hands, she held the business card Nicholas had given her, his private number written on the back in elegant script. Her sister Sophie climbed out onto the fire escape beside her. At 17, Sophie had the same dark hair and gentle features as Emma, but her eyes held a wisdom beyond her years. Mama told me, Sophie said quietly, about the marriage proposal. Emma sighed. I don't know what to do, Soph. How can I marry a stranger? But how can I let our family lose everything? What's he like? Is Nicholas Blackthorne? Emma thought about those gray eyes, the way they seemed to hold secrets and pain, cold, controlled, rich beyond imagination. But there's something else, something broken about him. Maybe you could help fix him, Sophie suggested, with the optimism of youth. I'm not a repair project, Sophie. I'm supposed to be starting my life, not sacrificing it for someone else's emotional damage. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the traffic flow through the streets below. Whatever you decide, Sophie finally said, I'll support you. But remember, sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most unexpected rewards. The wedding that wasn't next morning, Emma called the number on Nicholas's business card. Her hands trembled as she dialed, but her voice was steady when he answered. I'll do it, she said simply. Good. The ceremony will be this Saturday. My assistant will send you the details. That's only 4 days away. I see no point in delaying. Goodbye, Miss Chen. The line went dead, leaving Emma staring at her phone. In disbelief? In 4 days, she would be married to a man she barely knew. The wedding was nothing like the fairy tale ceremonies Emma had dreamed of as a little girl. It took place in Nicholas's lawyer's office, with only the necessary witnesses present. Emma wore a simple white dress she'd bought at a department store, while Nicholas looked impeccable in a tailored navy suit. The ceremony lasted exactly 7 minutes. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Nicholas shook Emma's hand instead of kissing her. It was the most impersonal wedding in history. Welcome to the family, Mrs. Blackthorne, he said. And Emma realized with a shock that she was no longer Emma Chen. She was now Emma Blackthorne, wife to a billionaire, trapped in a loveless marriage. That felt more like a business merger than a union of two souls. As they left the lawyer's office, Nicholas's assistant handed Emma a key card. This is for your suite at Mr. Blackthorne's residence, Mrs. Morrison. The head housekeeper will show you around and help you get settled. Emma looked at the key card, then at her new husband. When will I see you again? When necessary, Nicholas replied, already walking toward his waiting car. James will drive you to the house. I have business to attend to. Just like that, Emma found herself alone on her wedding day, married to a stranger who had already made it clear that their relationship would be nothing more than a contract written on expensive paper. The Blackthorne estate sat on 10 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, overlooking Puget Sound. As the car wound up the circular driveway, Emma pressed her face to the window in amazement. The mansion was a masterpiece of modern architecture. All clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the late afternoon sun like mirrors. James Wellington. Nicholas's assistant was a kind man in his 50s, with silver hair and gentle brown eyes. He had tried to make conversation during the drive, but Emma was too overwhelmed to respond with more than polite murmurs. "Mrs. Blackthorne," he said as they pulled up to the main entrance, "I know this is all very overwhelming. Please remember that everyone here wants to help make your transition as smooth as possible." The front door opened before they could knock, revealing a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair pulled back in an elegant bun. Her blue eyes were warm despite her formal appearance. "Welcome home, Mrs. Blackthorne," she said with a slight British accent. "I'm Mrs. Helena Morrison, the head housekeeper. I've been looking forward to meeting you." Emma followed Mrs. Morrison through the marble-floored foyer, past a sweeping staircase that curved toward the second floor. Original paintings lined the walls, and fresh flowers filled crystal vases on antique tables. "The house has 23 rooms," Mrs. Morrison explained as they walked. "Your suite is on the east wing, with a lovely view of the gardens and the sound. Mr. Blackthorne's quarters are in the west wing, so you'll have complete privacy." They climbed the staircase, Emma's heels clicking on the marble steps. The east wing corridor was lined with more artwork, and Emma recognized several pieces from famous contemporary artists. "Here we are," Mrs. Morrison said, opening a set of double doors. Emma gasped. The suite was larger than her family's entire apartment. A sitting area with a fireplace occupied one corner, while a king-sized bed with a canopy of sheer white curtains dominated the bedroom. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking the water. "The closet is through there," Mrs. Morrison pointed to another set of doors. "Mr. Blackthorne had it stocked with clothing in your size. If anything doesn't fit properly, we can have alterations made." Emma opened the closet doors and nearly fainted. Designer dresses, shoes, and accessories filled the space. There were casual clothes, formal gowns, and everything in between. It was like stepping into a high-end boutique. "How did he know my size?" Emma asked, running her fingers over a silk evening gown. Mrs. Morrison's expression grew slightly uncomfortable. "Mr. Blackthorne is very thorough in his business dealings." The first night that evening, Emma dined alone in the mansion's formal dining room. The table could seat 20 people, making her feel small and isolated as she picked at the gourmet meal prepared by the estate's chef. She had changed into one of the designer dresses from the closet, a simple but elegant black piece that fit her perfectly. It felt strange wearing clothes chosen by a man she barely knew, like playing dress-up in someone else's life. Mrs. Morrison appeared as Emma was finishing her dessert. "Will there be anything else, Mrs. Blackthorne?" "Please call me Emma." "And yes, I was wondering about Mr. Blackthorne. When does he usually come home?" "Mr. Blackthorne keeps irregular hours. Sometimes he works very late, sometimes he travels for business. You shouldn't wait up for him." Emma nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. She wasn't sure why she felt disappointed. This was exactly what Nicholas had promised, to marriage in name only, with minimal contact between them. After dinner, she explored more of the mansion. The library took her breath away, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable reading. Chairs positioned near tall windows. She found classics, contemporary fiction, art books, and business texts. Everything was organized with meticulous care. In the corner of the library sat a baby grand piano, its black surface polished to perfection. Emma had played piano as a child, and her fingers itched to touch the keys. She sat on the bench and began to play a soft melody, losing herself in the music. "Beautiful," a deep voice said from the doorway. Emma spun around to find Nicholas watching her. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, making him look slightly less intimidating than he had in his office. "I'm sorry," Emma said, standing quickly. "Didn't think you'd mind if I played. I don't mind. Catherine used to play that same piece." "Catherine?"
Aquas.
Nicholas's expression hardened, and Emma realized she had touched on something painful. "Fiancé, she died 3 years ago?" The pieces began to fall into place. Pain in his eyes, his insistence on a loveless marriage, his need for complete emotional distance. "I'm sorry for your loss," Emma said softly. "Don't be. It's not your concern." He turned to leave, then paused. "There's something you should know. Tomorrow evening, We're attending a charity gala. You'll need to play the role of the devoted wife. Can you handle that? Emma lifted her chin. I can handle whatever you need me to handle, Mr. Blackthorne. Nicholas, he corrected. We're married now.
Ow.
You should use my first name, at least in public. After he left, Emma remained in the library, staring at the piano keys. Catherine. Who was she, and how had she died? And why did Emma feel estranged? Jealousy toward a woman she'd never met. The charity gala next evening, Emma stood before her bathroom mirror, barely recognizing herself. The stylist Nicholas had sent had transformed her into someone who belonged in his world. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and her makeup was flawless. The midnight blue gown she wore hugged her curves perfectly and sparkled with tiny crystals that caught the light. Nicholas appeared in her sitting room as she emerged from the bedroom. And for a moment, his carefully controlled expression slipped. His gray eyes widened slightly as he took in her appearance. You look beautiful, he said, then seemed to catch himself, appropriate for the occasion. He looked devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, and Emma felt her heart skip a beat. She reminded herself sternly that this was all pretend. A performance for the benefit of Seattle's social elite. The gala was held at the Four Seasons Hotel, and Emma was amazed by the opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast sparkles of light over women in designer gowns and men in perfectly tailored tuxedos. The guests were the wealthy and powerful of Seattle. People whose names regularly appeared in the society pages Nicholas kept. His hand on the small of Emma's back as they moved through the crowd, introducing her as his wife. She smiled and made polite conversation, playing her part perfectly, but she couldn't help noticing how people looked at them, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed surprise. Nicholas Blackthorne actually got married. She heard one woman whisper to her companion, I never thought he'd get over Catherine Moreau's death. Catherine Moreau. Now, Emma had a last name to go with the mysterious woman who seemed to haunt her marriage. During dinner, Emma sat beside Nicholas at a table with several other couples. The conversation flowed around topics of business, politics, and social gossip. Emma contributed when appropriate, drawing on her education and natural intelligence to hold her own. Your wife is charming, said Margaret Whitfield, the wife of a prominent real estate developer. How did you two meet? Nicholas's hand found Emma's under the table, his fingers intertwining with hers, in a gesture that looked intimate but felt like a warning. Through mutual friends, Emma said smoothly. Sometimes the best relationships develop when you least expect them. Nicholas squeezed her hand, and she wasn't sure if it was approval or surprise at her quick thinking. Later, danced to the orchestra's waltz, Emma found herself studying Nicholas's face. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight scar on his chin, the way his jaw tightened when he was thinking. You did well tonight, he said as they moved together across the dance floor. Did you expect me to embarrass? I wasn't sure what to expect. You're not what I thought you'd be. What did you think I'd be? Nicholas was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes distant, simpler, more predictable. Emma felt a flash of irritation. Sorry to disappoint you. By having a personality, to her surprise, Nicholas almost smiled. I didn't say I was disappointed. The discovery over the following weeks, Emma settled into a routine at the mansion. She spent her mornings painting in the sunroom Nicholas had converted into an art studio. For her, complete with professional easels and every supply she could want. Afternoons were for reading in the library or walking through the gardens with their spectacular view of the Sound. Nicholas continued to keep his distance, though she occasionally saw him in the evenings when he returned from work. Their interactions were polite but minimal, exactly as he had promised. Emma's curiosity about Catherine Moreau grew stronger each day. She found herself searching the mansion for clues about the woman who had owned Nicholas's heart. In his study, she discovered a photograph tucked behind some books. It showed Nicholas and a beautiful blonde woman with bright blue eyes and a radiant smile. They were on a yacht, arms around each other, looking completely happy. Catherine had been stunning, the kind of woman who belonged in Nicholas's world of wealth and privilege. Emma stared at the photo. wondering what it would feel like to have someone look at her the way Nicholas was looking at Catherine in that picture. You shouldn't be in here? Emma spun around to find Nicholas in the doorway, his expression dark with anger. I was looking for a book, she lied, quickly replacing the photograph. In my private study? I don't think so. He crossed the room and took the photo from her hands. Stay out of my personal things, Emma. That wasn't part of our agreement. Maybe if you told me something about yourself, I wouldn't have to go looking for answers. You don't need answers. You need to remember your place in this arrangement. Words stung, and Emma felt her temper flare. My place? As your purchased wife? Your pretty decoration for social events? Exactly. Nicholas's voice was cold, but Emma caught a flicker of something else in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. Well, excuse me for forgetting that I'm just another piece of property you own. She pushed past him toward the door, but his hand caught her arm, stopping her. Emma, wait. She turned back, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. I didn't mean that the way it sounded. Yes, you did. And you know what? Maybe that's exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you for reminding me not to get confused about what this relationship really is. Emma pulled free from his grip and walked out of the study, her heart pounding with hurt and anger. Behind her, she heard Nicholas call her name, but she didn't. Turn back. 3 months into their marriage, Emma had found a rhythm in her new life, but she felt increasingly like a bird in a golden cage. She had everything money could buy, but she was desperately lonely. Nicholas remained distant and cold, treating her more like a business associate than a wife, even a fake one. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening. Emma had been painting in her studio when she heard raised voices from Nicholas's study. Curious despite herself, she crept closer and recognized the voice of Thomas Blackthorne, Nicholas's father, whom she had met only once at a brief family dinner. This charade has gone on long enough, Thomas was saying, his voice sharp with authority. Marrying that girl was supposed to be temporary, just long enough to secure the Chen family's silence about the accident. Now you're acting like this is a real marriage. Emma's blood turned to ice. What accident? What silence? The arrangement is working perfectly, Nicholas replied, his voice carefully controlled. Emma plays her part well, and the Chen family has kept quiet about what really happened to Catherine. Catherine's death was an accident. Nicholas. A tragic accident that had nothing to do with the Chen family. But if word got out about your involvement in covering up the real cause, it would destroy everything we've built. Emma pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding so loudly she was afraid they would hear it. Nicholas had been involved in covering up something about Catherine's death, and somehow her family was connected to it. I know what I'm doing, Father. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're getting emotionally attached. To this girl? That wasn't part of the plan. I'm not attached to anyone, Nicholas said firmly. But Emma heard something in his voice that made her wonder if he was trying to convince his father or himself. Good. Because once we're certain the Chen family won't cause any problems, you'll need to end this marriage quietly. Divorce, perhaps a settlement, but nothing that draws attention. Emma had heard enough. She slipped back to her studio, her mind reeling with questions and betrayal. The marriage contract hadn't been about business or convenience. It had been about keeping her family quiet about something connected to Catherine's death. What? Could her family possibly know about Nicholas's dead fiancé? The search for truth? For truth enabled to sleep that night, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She needed to know the truth about Catherine's death and her family's connection. To it. The next morning, while Nicholas was at work, she took a taxi into the city and went to the Seattle Public Library. It took hours of searching through old newspaper archives. But finally, Emma found what she was looking for. 3 years ago, Catherine Moreau, prominent socialite and fiancée of tech billionaire Nicholas Blackthorne, died in a car accident on a rainy night. She had been driving alone when her car skidded off the road and hit a tree, but there was more to the story. Emma found a smaller article published a week later that mentioned an ongoing investigation into the accident. Apparently there had been some question about whether Catherine had been drinking, and the toxicology report was delayed. Then, suddenly, the investigation was closed, and no further articles appeared. Emma's hands shook as she printed out the articles. Her family's electronics repair shop was mentioned in one small paragraph. Robert Chen, the owner, had apparently been working late that night and had been one of the first people to arrive at the accident scene. He had called 911 and waited with Catherine until the paramedics arrived. But why would that require keeping her family quiet? What could her father have seen that would be worth buying a wife to ensure his silence? The confrontation that evening, Emma waited in the library for Nicholas to come home. She had the newspaper articles spread out on the coffee table in front of her, her heart pounding with nervous energy. Nicholas appeared in the doorway just after 9 o'clock, looking tired from his long day. When he saw Emma sitting there with the papers, his face went pale. "What is this?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. The truth, or at least part of it. Emma stood up, facing him across the room. "I know about Catherine's accident. I know my father was there. What I don't know is why you felt the need to buy yourself a wife to keep him quiet about it." Nicholas closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, Emma saw a pain so deep it took her breath away. "You don't understand," he said quietly. Then, "Help me understand. What really happened that night, Nicholas?" He was quiet for so long that Emma wondered if he would answer at all. Finally, he walked to the window, staring out at the dark water of the Sound. "Catherine and I had a fight that night," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A terrible fight about our engagement, about whether we really loved each other or were just together because it's what our families expected." Emma remained silent, sensing that he needed to tell this story in his own way, in his own time. "She left my apartment angry, said she needed space to think. I should have gone after her, should have insisted she'd not drive while she was upset. But I was angry too, and proud, and I let her go." His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "An hour later, I got the call. Catherine was dead, her car wrapped around a tree on a dark road. The police said she'd been speeding, that the road was slick from rain, but I knew the real reason she'd crashed. She was upset because of our fight, distracted, not paying attention." To the road, Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Nicholas, that wasn't your fault, wasn't it?" He turned to face her, his gray eyes bright with unshed tears. "If I hadn't let her leave angry, if I had gone after her, insisted on driving her home, she'd still be alive. But what does this have to do with my father?" Nicholas rubbed his face with his hands, suddenly looking older than his 32 years. "Your father arrived at the accident scene before the police. Catherine was still alive then, barely conscious. She kept saying my name, saying she was sorry, that she loved me and wanted to come home. Your father heard everything." He held her hand while they waited for the ambulance, and she died there on the road, asking him to tell me that she forgave me. Emma's heart broke for the man standing before her, carrying the weight of guilt and grief for 3 years. "Your father never told anyone what Catherine said. Not the police, not the reporters, not anyone. He protected my privacy during the worst moment of my life. But my father was convinced that someday Mr. Chen might change his mind, might decide to tell the world that Nicholas Blackthorne's last fight with his fiancée had contributed to her death. So you married me to keep him quiet? I married you because my father insisted it was the only way to ensure your family's continued silence. He thought that if you were tied to our family, your father would never risk exposing something that could hurt his daughter's husband." Emma sank back onto the sofa, overwhelmed by the complexity of emotions swirling through her. Anger at being used, sorrow for Nicholas's pain, and a growing understanding of why he had built such high walls around his heart. "You could have just asked," she said finally. "My father would never have betrayed your confidence. He's not that kind of man. I know that now. I've gotten to know your family over these past months, and I realized my father was wrong about their character. But by then, it was too late. We were already married, and I didn't know how to undo what I'd done without hurting you even more." The revelation. Emma looked at Nicholas, really looked at him, and saw not the cold billionaire who had purchased her like a commodity, but a man broken by grief and guilt, manipulated by his father's fears and paranoia. "There's something else," Nicholas said, his voice so quiet she had to strain to hear it. "Something I haven't admitted to myself until recently, Emma waited, her heart pounding. This marriage was supposed to be purely business. I was supposed to feel nothing for you, treat you like a convenient arrangement. But Emma, somewhere along the way, that changed. He crossed the room and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. I've fallen in love with you. Really deeply, completely in love with you. And I know I have no right to feel that way. Not after what I've done. Not after the lies and manipulation that brought us together. Emma stared at him, speechless. This was the last thing she had expected to hear. I love the way you paint with such passion, the way you stand up to me when I'm being unreasonable. It's the way you've brought life and warmth into this cold house. I love your laugh, your stubbornness, your kind heart that somehow found room to care about a broken man who didn't deserve it. Tears were streaming down Emma's face now. Nicholas ... I know you can't forgive me. I know you'll want to leave, and I'll understand. I'll make sure the divorce gives you everything you need to start over, to build the life you should have had before I selfishly took it away from you. Now, Emma pulled her hands free from his and stood up, pacing to the window. Nicholas remained on his knees, watching her with hopeless eyes. You're right about one thing, she said finally, not turning around. What you did was wrong, using me, lying to me, treating me like property instead of a person. Nicholas closed his eyes, preparing for the killing blow. But, Emma continued, turning to face him, you're wrong about something else. She walked back to him, reaching out to touch his face gently. You're wrong if you think I can't forgive you. You're wrong if you think I don't love you too. Nicholas's eyes flew open, hope and disbelief warring in their gray depths. Been fighting my feelings for months, Emma continued, telling myself that what I felt for you was just gratitude or Stockholm Syndrome or anything other than love. But the truth is, I fell in love with you despite everything. I fell in love with the man who converted a sunroom into an art studio for a wife he claimed not to care about. I fell in love with the man who plays piano when he thinks no one is listening, who takes care of everyone in his life even when he pretends not to care. Nicholas rose to his feet, his hands framing her face.
Eyes.
Emma, are you sure? Because once I kiss you, once we cross this line, there's no going back. This marriage will be real in every way that matters. Instead of answering with words, Emma rose. On her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then deeper as 3 months of suppressed emotion finally found release. When they broke apart, both were breathless. I love you, Nicholas Blackthorne, Emma whispered. The real you, not the cold businessman you pretend to be. I love you too, Emma Blackthorne. And I promise you I'll spend the rest of my life making up for the way this started.
Oh.
The New Beginning. 6 months later, Emma stood in the same library where she had confronted Nicholas with the truth. But everything was different now. The room was filled with friends and family, celebrating their first wedding anniversary. But more importantly, celebrating their decision to renew their vows in a ceremony, filled with real love instead of cold contracts. Emma wore a wedding dress. She had chosen herself, a flowing creation of silk and lace that made her feel like a princess. Nicholas stood beside her in a perfectly tailored tuxedo,
His eyes bright with happiness.
instead of the cold distance she remembered from their first wedding. I, Nicholas, take you, Emma, to be my wife, he said, his voice strong and clear. Not because of contracts or arrangements or family pressure, but because I choose you, freely and completely, to be my partner in all of life's adventures. I take you, Nicholas, she replied, tears of joy streaming down her face, to be my husband. I choose to love you not despite our complicated beginning, but because of how far we've traveled together to find real love. Robert and Margaret Chen sat in the front row, beaming with pride at their daughter's happiness. They'd been shocked to learn the truth about the marriage arrangement, but they had also seen how Nicholas had changed, how he looked at Emma now, with the same adoration she showed him, Sophie Chen. Now 18 and starting her first year of college thanks to Nicholas's generosity, served as maid of honor. She had been the first to notice that her sister's arranged marriage had somehow transformed into a real love story. Even Thomas Blackthorne was there. looking somewhat uncomfortable but trying to make amends for his role in the deception that had brought them together. He was slowly learning to accept that sometimes the heart knows better than the head what will bring true happiness. As the ceremony concluded and Nicholas kissed his bride, Emma marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. Had started as a cold business transaction, had become the greatest love story of her life. "So, Mrs. Blackthorne," Nicholas whispered in her ear as they danced their first dance as a truly married couple, "any regrets about signing that contract?" Emma smiled, remembering the terrified 19-year-old girl who had agreed to marry a stranger to save her family. "Only one," she said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him softly. "I regret that it took us so long to stop pretending we didn't love each other." Nicholas laughed, spinning her around the dance floor as their friends and family applauded. "Well then," he said, pulling her close, "I guess we'll just have to make up for lost time." And they did. In the years that followed, Emma and Nicholas built a life filled with love, laughter, and the kind of partnership that can only come from two people who have seen each other at their worst and chosen to love anyway. Emma opened her art gallery, featuring not only her own work, but also pieces from other local artists. Nicholas expanded his business, but he made sure to always put family first. They had 3 children together, 2 daughters and a son, who grew up knowing they were deeply loved, and that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the most unexpected ways and on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the house was peaceful. Emma and Nicholas would sometimes sit in their library, remembering the night when truth finally set them both free to love. The girl who had been sold to a cold millionaire at 19 had discovered that sometimes what seems like an ending is really just the beginning of the most beautiful story of all, the end.